This is Zach from GBC, that's super excited about the most exciting cycle pathway coming to California in the Great Redwood Trail, as we'll take a closer look at the connectivity of this future route. Covering over 300 miles from the Bay Area up above Eureka, this future trail will go through 5 counties, including Marin, Sonoma, Mendocino, a little bit of Trinity, and Humboldt. This would be California's longest pathway to date, thanks to the tracks laid down by the Northwest Pacific Railroad that opened in 1907. But with floods, landslides, and even fires, its viability started to wane in the 1970s as alternate options were floated to keep this right-of-way from being abandoned. In 2018, State Senator Mike McGuire introduced legislation transitioning the space into the Great Redwood Trail, and 4 years later, the agency was formed to plan out the upper 3/4 of this project. Already we've seen a number of Great Rails to Trails projects, like the Biz Johnson up in Lassen County, thanks to a footprint from an earlier time that shows how great the future can be, but on a much larger scale. You can easily recognize the importance of such a project, like the Sierra Butte Trail Stewardship's Connected Community Plan, as a number of regions are realizing the potential of cycling tourism with a well-developed network and a significant economic impact. Another big benefit of the Great Redwood Trail is how it enhances one of the world's most well-known cycling routes in biking down the Pacific Coast Highway. One of my biggest hurdles in my Lost Coast trip was figuring out how to get up north, having to fly up to McKinleyville and shipping my bike to avoid having to ride up that direction into the headwinds. The Great Redwood Trail going inland avoids that issue, plus going up a railroad grade that makes a loop very palatable. Another note is how the trail will be multi-surface, all the way from concrete to gravel. With the master plan seeking comments, one of the biggest hurdles is funding, as the route has a number of old bridges and tunnels that are in various states of disrepair. This process is also engaging with a number of tribes, as this route goes over ancestral lands, and this is a great opportunity to teach and preserve this history. When you get an idea of what the Great Redwood Trail could be, I'm sure you're eager for it to come sooner than later. So let's get to taking a look. We'll begin on the southern end, where the Northwest Pacific Railroad terminated at Sausalito Point. After you'll find a bikeway a little through town, the first 8 miles have already been converted, except for one small section that you can see disappearing into the hill that the Marin County Bicycle Coalition is working to get reopened. Crossing over Sir Francis Drake Boulevard in Larkspur is noteworthy, and I'm not just talking about where the bridge used to be that Dirty Harry jumped into a school bus, but the train station leads to the next 71 miles of future trail that's under the authority under the Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit District. Service on this commuter railway opened in 2019, currently heading up to Santa Rosa, with future connections all the way up to Cloverdale planned, with already 28 miles of bikeway in place, with more than double already planned out. Heading out of the Cal Park Hill Tunnel, there's a number of good-sized cities you'll be passing through in San Rafael and Novato before crossing the line into Sonoma and having to go off track a little bit into Petaluma and its quaint downtown area. After making a straight line through Rohnert Park, you go through the largest city in Sonoma, in Santa Rosa, and the home to Charles Schulz. Right past town is the current end of the line for Smart, and if you're tempted, the newest location of the Russian River Brewery. As after Windsor, Healdsburg sits next with its Wine Valley charm, an already constructed bike path through town. You should notice by this time that the trail doesn't stray too far from the 101, as after passing through a couple small towns, you reach Cloverdale, where the Great Redwood Trail takes over for planning for the duration, and you can get a preview of the experience on a Russian River rail bike excursion. Mendocino County sits just beyond, as the route now parallels the Russian River, as both have to navigate this narrowment. The hills soon scale back, revealing the charm of Hopland. As soon after, you'll cross the 100-mile mark and the largest town in the county, in Eureka, that is a good overnight option before the toughest stretch of the ride. Veering left after Redwood Valley and saying goodbye to the Russian River, you start your largest climb on the trail, gaining over 1,000 feet, but it's spread over 9 miles, averaging just over 2%, followed by a similarly graded descent into the town of Willits that also is a connection to the skunk train that goes all the way out to the coast, to Fort Bragg. Just past town, the trail separates from the 101, giving you 5 miles of the most isolated section so far. But after reuniting with the highway, your next turn takes your remoteness to another level. Turning off on Cavello Road starts an 85-mile stretch, where with your encounters with town are pretty much non-existent. 15 miles down, Highway 162 splits off. As you merge onto the Eel River, in this section, there are many bridges and tunnels that need various levels of attention, as the Eel River has a high erosion rate, as also being California's third largest watershed. About 30 miles up from this junction, you'll briefly cross into Trinity County, and over to the Island Mountain Tunnel that at 3/4 of a mile caught fire in 1978, and if you look closely, you'll still find abandoned cars down in the river. Continuing through this channel, right after the 200-mile mark, and come across your biggest settlement until you reach the 101 in Alder Point. Although with a population a little over 100, and I'm sure this trail will bring a lot more future accommodations. As you head up, you start finding occasional pockets of homes, including at Fort Seward, that played a role in the Bald Hills War in the 1860s that targeted a number of indigenous tribes. Soon, sandy bars become a bit more prevalent along the Eel River, and even smaller bridges for the locals appear. Approaching Humboldt Redwood State Park brings a critical point in the trip. Unless you're taking the more rigorous Lost Coast route on your way back down south, most riders heading towards the coast tend to go in the 101 and Avenue of the Giants to Leggett, where they can connect to Highway 1. There's still another 65 miles left on the Great Redwood Trail, but there are other options to backtrack, like going through the historic town of Ferndale. Back on the GRT, you cross the Eel River for the final time, continuing under these giants, passing through the world's largest redwood mill in Scotia. After rolling under the iconic Green Bridge in Rio Dell, the hills start to shed as we come to the trail's first split, spanning 7 miles heading east to Carlotta, with its root in the 19th century as a resort town. In riding by Fortuna, you're passing the largest town you've seen in 150 miles since Ukiah, as you soon go by the last crossing of the Eel River in Fernbridge, followed by an unexpected trestle bridge in these lowlands, and the quaint community of Lolita. Not far after, you enter Eureka, which is the largest city between Portland and San Francisco along the coast, with its prominence along Humboldt Bay, serving as the county seat, having played a big role in shipping lumber, and with the real Victorian flair. Rounding out the north side of the bay, Arcata hails from the same era, as its port played a more prominent role with mining, and also the home of Cal Poly Humboldt. To the west, the second spur of the GRT spans down the peninsula, adding another 10 miles to a number of communities that are still tied with shipping. Continuing up from Arcata, the last 10 miles rounds the Mad River, rolling into Blue Lake that dates back to the Civil War era, and it's hard to believe we're at the end of the line. What makes the Great Redwood Trail so exciting is there's no better way for exploration than on a bike. And this route is rich in discovery, in landscapes, and history. While the elevation profile of this route makes it friendly for all riders, You're gonna regret rocketing through these surroundings, because this should be seen as a bike touring experience. If you want to participate and keep up with the planning and development process, please follow the Great Redwood Trail Authority for updates. It's amazing how much adventure California already offers. And yet we're ready to gladly welcome the Great Redwood Trail as another one of the greatest. And we'd like to keep telling the story. So please help support Gravel Bike California by either subscribing or going to our Patreon so we can tell you more. From the state of dirt